Where do people go when they die? Now, I'm not talking about the afterlife. Those of us left behind have to decide what to do with the remains. For many, a grave dug in the earth or an urn on a mantle would be just fine, but sometimes we go to great lengths to construct a final resting place. Even after someone has given up the ghost, we may build special houses of the dead. Some of these structures are space-saving measures, and others might have spiritual significance, and they might be monuments to ensure that a memory lives on. The architecture of the dead reflects the culture that built it, so let's explore these sites to understand why they were built. So how did we begin preparing tombs for our dead? In prehistoric times, people were often buried in their homes. Britannica says that this may have led to the development of the tomb as its own purpose-built house of the dead. The structure of these ancient tombs reflected the appearance of regular houses within that time and culture, complete with furnishings and personal effects to be used in the next life. The objects found within a tomb could reflect the dead's life and status, and it gave us an idea of what was important and valuable at the time. In ancient Mexico, some tombs contained cooking tools like the molcajete, and in Egypt, you might be sent off with a golden tongue, which would allow you to communicate with the gods of the afterlife. Particularly powerful individuals might be buried with their servants, who would be killed for the occasion. The tomb of Puabi, a queen of Ur, was discovered to contain the remains of anywhere from 60 to more than 70 people in what archaeologists called a death pit. These poor people were expected to continue their servitude in the afterlife, which shows you how very little their existence mattered to the rulers of the time. But in a stroke of genius, other civilizations began swapping out human beings with effigies, like the tomb paintings of Egypt and the terracotta army of Qin Shi Huang's mausoleum. But these were tombs for individuals. How did we prepare a place for the masses? Catacombs are underground passageways with alcoves and chambers carved out for tombs. Now, many cities have tunneled under their streets for one reason or another: fortifications, sewage and waterways, or even mining. But these subterranean corridors take on a unique role when we use them for burial. They become hallowed ground, solemn and silent halls of the dead. The term catacomb first applied to burial sites outside Rome. There are numerous such sites surrounding Rome, as it was forbidden to bury anyone in the city itself. The burials in these tunnels reflects a variety of faiths and cultures. Despite the ancient Roman preference for cremation, burial gained traction throughout the 3rd and 4th centuries. This is due at least in part to the rising Christian influence in Rome, and the catacombs actually played an important role in early Christianity. In addition to providing a place to bury the dead and refuge from invading barbarians, Christian catacombs harbored early examples of religious art. In subterranean fresco, this art depicts scenes from both the Old and New Testaments, various miracles, and early images of Christ. And there are other catacombs elsewhere in Italy as well, like the Catacomb of Calixtus, which is known for its tomb of the popes. And in Sicily, one catacomb is famous for its mummies. The Catacomb de' Cappuccini features a long corridor with mummies in various degrees of preservation. And who were these mummies? The original residents were monks from Palermo's Capuchin monastery, but over time, the catacomb became a desirable place to be buried, a who's who of corpses. And the monks are now joined by artists, surgeons, military leaders, athletes, and aristocrats. The Paris catacombs span around 200 miles of underground passages, housing the remains of about 6 million people. And the catacombs might be their final resting place, but it typically wasn't their first. In the 1700s, Paris faced a serious cemetery overcrowding problem, so the city began moving their long dead to the limestone mines beneath the city streets. There's a portion of the catacombs that are now open as a museum, but it only gives you a glimpse of the vast underground network. The rest of the catacombs are restricted, and those who try to explore it do so at their own peril. In 2017, a group of teenagers became lost in the catacombs for 3 days, eventually saved by rescue dogs, and according to The Guardian, they had to be treated for hypothermia. The ambient temperature in the catacombs is about 15 degrees Celsius, or 59 degrees Fahrenheit, and they should be grateful for the rescue. It's easy to get lost down there, and at least one person has died after becoming lost in the dark. In 1793, a man named Philibert Aspère entered the catacombs from a stairway at the hospital where he may have worked. His body was discovered in the depths 11 years later, and he was eventually buried in the catacombs. So we make buildings for our dead. Of course, we've got to put them somewhere. But some cultures have put those old bones to work and made buildings of the dead. Bricks and mortar, stone and marble. These are all fine building materials, but let's not overlook the utility of human bones. Ossuaries are resting places specifically intended for housing bones. When all that pesky flesh and sinew are gone, it becomes much easier to store human remains. Sometimes burial is only a temporary rest for the body. After the flesh has wasted away, the skeleton may be unearthed and placed in an ossuary to free up that burial space. It's a practical measure when real estate is scarce, and ossuaries come in all shapes and sizes. They can be simple boxes filled with bones, or they can be elaborate chambers decorated with the bones themselves. Take the Skull Chapel in Poland, for example. This ossuary, known as the Catholic Cemetery, is decorated with the bones of about 3,000 people, and there are skeletons of about 21,000 more in the basement. It was constructed in 1776, and for the next 18 years, priest Vaclav Tomaszek ornamented the interior with human skulls and bones. And how did he get all these bones? They were the remains of people who died of plague and disease, hunger and war, specifically the 30 Years' War and Silesian Wars. And after his death, Tomaszek's remains were added to the chapel along with those that helped him build it. You can see his skull at the altar. And that's not the only chapel adorned with skeletal decor. In the Czech Republic, the Sedlec ossuary is decorated with parts from as many as 70,000 bodies. The chapel and its surrounding burial grounds have a long history, once part of Sedlec Abbey, which was founded in 1142. In 1278, it's said that an abbot sprinkled the cemetery with dirt from Golgotha, the site of the crucifixion. This made the burial ground a very popular place to be interred, and space filled up quickly thanks to the arrival of the plague in the 14th century. But at the start of the 15th century, the church broke ground for a new sanctuary on the site. Graves would have to be exhumed, with the bones stored in the building's new ossuary. While these bones were stacked and stored for centuries, they would be put to new use in 1870. Carpenter František Rent was tasked with organizing the bones, and if that's all he had to do, he really over-delivered. The result was a magnificent, if macabre, display of chapel features all made from human bone. Dazzling religious displays, garlands, and a coat of arms for the local aristocrats, all artfully crafted. The most striking feature is the central chandelier, which is said to have one of every bone in the human body. And when Rent left his signature on the building, he did so fittingly with more bones. The architecture of historic New Orleans draws heavily from its European colonization, and this extends to its cemeteries. The above-ground cemeteries of New Orleans are as iconic as the city's Creole townhouses and iron balconies. And the reason the graves rise like cities of their own is also very unique to New Orleans. For starters, the decision to bury people above ground was the solution to an environmental problem. The city is below sea level, and underground graves could be washed away. But that's not the only reason. French and Spanish colonists were recreating the necropolis style that was common in Europe, laid out like cities of the dead and filled with mausoleums and monuments. One of the most well-known of these cemeteries is St. Louis Cemetery No. 1. It's the oldest of these cemeteries, and with such a long history, it's home to quite a few interesting graves. Architects, chess champions, pirates, and politicians are all permanent residents here, and it's said to hold the tomb of Marie Laveau, a healer and herbalist, famously known as a voodoo priestess. Her grave has been a popular tourist attraction, and while some people would leave offerings, others would leave a mark on the grave which has caused damage over time. Look, if you ever get to visit a place like this, remember that it's somebody's resting place. Be respectful. Some of these above-ground cemeteries can be visited today, but unless you have family there, you might have to join a tour. And if you visit St. Louis Cemetery No. 1, keep an eye out for actor Nicolas Cage's tomb. It's the 9-foot-tall pyramid. In parts of Asia and the Middle East, Zoroastrians have a long-established tradition of giving up their dead to nature. Through the act of excarnation, a body is exposed to the elements to speed along decomposition. Scavengers like vultures pick the bones clean, and those bones might be later placed in an ossuary. In Zoroastrian belief, a dead body is impure, but earth, fire, and water are sacred. That means that a body cannot be buried, cremated, or set to sea. And offering your remains to nourish the scavengers can be seen as a final act of giving, sharing the last of yourself with the vultures. Records show that Zoroastrians have practiced excarnation as early as the 5th century BC, but by the 9th century AD, special structures rose to facilitate the exposure above ground. These are the Towers of Silence, or dogmas. Typically, the tower is a circular structure with a roof that gradually slopes to an opening in the middle. That opening would contain an ossuary where the bones would eventually be taken. Bodies are laid in concentric circles and left to decompose in the sunlight. Vultures may also fly in to feed on the remains. And this is not unwelcome or incidental. The vultures are an essential part of this process. Mark Twain wrote about a Parsi funeral in his book Following the Equator. After the body was taken into a tower, he says, "Then the ring of vultures rose, flapping their wings, and swooped down into the tower to devour the body. Nothing was left of it but a clean-picked skeleton when they flocked out again a few minutes afterward." Although there are still ancient dogmas still standing in Iran, excarnation was banned in the country by the 1970s. However, the Parsi Zoroastrians of India can still use their Towers of Silence. But there's a problem. The vulture population of Asia has declined drastically. Exposure to pesticides and livestock drugs have led to extensive poisoning. One vulture species had declined by 99.7% in the early 2000s. Much of this is attributed to the cattle drug diclofenac. India banned that drug for veterinary use in 2006, but concerns still remain for the vulture population in that region. And the decreased vulture population sometimes leaves the excarnation process incomplete. And that's a shame. This ritual is a sacred act not only in service of the dead, but the environment as well. It's upsetting to see both a sacred practice and an entire species threatened in modern times. Finding space for the dead is a recurring challenge, especially in large cities. As populations expand, so does the need for burial space. This is the problem London faced in the 19th century. In her book From Here to Eternity, mortician Caitlin Doty paints an unpleasant picture. Stacks of coffins went 20 feet deep into the soil. Half-decomposed bodies were exposed to public view when wood from the coffins was smashed up and sold to the poor for firewood. Conditions were horrible, and in the 1820s, one architect proposed an ostentatious solution. Don't dig down, build up. Thomas Wilson offered his design for a massive granite pyramid to rise above Primrose Hall. It would tower over the London skyline at 94 stories high, with room for 5 million corpses. Wilson called his pyramid the Metropolitan Sepulchre, and he presented it to Parliament. And he brought impressive numbers to make his case. With a footprint of 18 acres, the pyramid would do the work of 1,000 acres of burial ground. That was a significant figure for the space-conscious city. The pyramid also capitalized on the city's fascination with Egypt. Increased travel and the import of artifacts had captured the British imagination. But the proposal was never approved. Crowned with an obelisk, the Metropolitan Sepulchre would have been 4 times the height of St. Paul's Cathedral. Londoners have been very particular about their skyline. It took them a long time to get used to the gherkin, so a massive monument to the dead would be a hard sell. And Londoners were also more interested in garden cemeteries. The idea of wandering halls of vaults and tombs in a stuffy pyramid was understandably unappealing. So these are just a few of the ways we've chosen to lay our dead to rest. This is a broad topic and one I'd be happy to come back to. If you want to read more about how different cultures handle their dead, then I really do recommend From Here to Eternity. It's fascinating, enlightening, and often very touching, and it's a great look at death customs around the world from a mortician's perspective. And if you enjoyed this video, I hope you'll stick around. I know it took me a bit longer to prepare this one, but I really enjoyed the research. Sometimes it just takes a bit longer than others. But I really enjoy making these videos, and I'm excited about the next one. And if you love topics like this, horror literature and history, then you're in the right place. And I'll be back with something else soon.